Hi, everybody. What an amazing crowd. My name is Kisagun. I'm the CEO and co-founder of T1. At T1, we're building an application infrastructure for cross-chain applications. And today I'm going to talk about cost of integrity in cross-chain executions and specifically POS. In Web3, we cannot just try, but we trust, but we have to verify. When you think about the traditional web, when I take an Uber, the Uber app makes a request to my bank, and my bank pays Uber. My bank does not have to check what distance I went. My bank does not have to verify the price of the ride. My bank just trusts Uber to be honest. However, you cannot have this property in Web3, which is an adversarial setting. Therefore, what we need to do is we need to verify. And this requirement of verification is what causes the talked about fragmentation across different chains. Today, I want to focus on integrity for a specific kind of data flow, and that is integrity between different chains, more specifically bringing one chain state data into another chain such that applications on different chains can be composable and can feel as one. Our thesis at T1 is we want to enable composable applications and composable app chains such that the user only interacts with the application but does not need to choose which underlying protocol the app is deployed on. And I want to go through a use case today. And my hypothesis is proof of stake is very, very expensive for cross-chain application integrity. Let's take this cross-margin use case where Alice has 10 BTC, let's say roughly $1 million, and she wants to go to this new app chain perpdex, which is super performant, and wants to earn a delta neutral yield on her WBTC, which means the perpdex takes a short position, so Alice just earns the funding rate without having any exposure. This is how protocols like Ethena work in the background. And not only that, but Alice also wants to earn yield on Aave, on L1. So she can double dip. It's a great opportunity for her. It's good for the perpdex because the cost of deposit is low. But there's one problem. If Alice gets liquidated because she's taken too much risk, we need to prove to L1, where Alice's funds are, that Alice is insolvent, and therefore the perpdex needs to get Alice's funds. Now, this needs to happen very, very fast because if it takes a long time, Alice's collateral could be worth less, and the perpdex can become insolvent. So basically for this like cross-chain, call it margin, call it yield use case, we need to prove that Alice is insolvent on the perpdex back to the L1 fast and correctly. Now, there are different ways we've dealt with integrity in our cross-chain ecosystem. Right? One is fraud proofs. This is how optimistic rollups work, and they're very, very slow. The next one is multi-sigs. Multi-sigs are fast. However, there is no economic stake, so it's unreliable. What I mean by this is a perpdex cannot trust a committee of multi-sig signers to timely let the L1 know that Alice is insolvent because the multi-sig signers have nothing to lose if they fail to perform. Then you have TEs, which is hardware execution, and this is fast, and this is reliable to an extent. And you have proof of stake, which can be fast enough for this case. However, my hypothesis is this is too expensive for an application who's just bootstrapping. And then you have zero knowledge proof, which if you decide not to go really specific in your data structure is not possible to do in real time. So let's say in the previous example that we spoke about, Alice wants to have 1 million collateral on the perpdex, assuming that we have a Tendermint kind of consensus model, which most proof-of-stake networks use today, that requires 1/3 stake to cheat the system. Basically, an attack that would give the attacker $1 million needs to cost the attacker less than $1 million. So the break-even POS budget for this is $3 million of staked assets. And assuming that we have to give 5% inflation for this asset, we're looking at 150K yearly cost of securing this 1 million collateral in a proof of stake world. And this is, in my opinion, just unattainable for a new project which doesn't have a token and can infinitely mint and has to pay out of pocket. And the problem is this just scales linearly. If you have 10 million, it's 1.5 million a year, yada, yada. If you look at Hyperliquid, they have around 4.5 billion of collateral or deposits. If we wanted to use this kind of instant settlement model to the L1, so your, let's say USDC could be earning yield, in a POS where you'd have to spend $600 million a year. This is a lot of money. So what we propose is, instead of trying to do proof of stake to secure these cross-chain application flows, we can have a tiered approach. And what makes most sense to start with is using TEs. TE is trusted execution environment is a hardware in which you can run code and you can attest to the integrity of the code that you're running on chain. And every time you run the code, the TE creates the same signature, so you can trust that whatever code is running is the same. And if there's a tampering with the TE and the code changes, then the signatures no longer match on chain. This is how we're building cross-chain applications at T1 today. This is a very cheap way for us to bootstrap cross-chain application use flows. However, what we plan to do in the future is this defense in depth model, which would further reduce cost of proof of stake. We want to do two additional things once we are able to show with just TEs that cross-chain applications work. The first one is we could actually require recomputation or re-execution backed by some sort of proof of stake and require consensus among TE nodes. The advantage of that is, in normal proof of stake, you're basically paying an economic penalty not to collude. But when you actually have TEs on top of it, you have to also pay for breaking into the TE, which, assuming these TEs are running in cloud data centers, is quite difficult. So that's one factor that would reduce the stake required to secure such a system. And the second area is we do periodic zero-knowledge proof generation. What that means is, in the example I gave you, we have to secure 1 million. But what we could do is we could decide to do zero-knowledge proof generation every so often, such that you can actually determine the economic security that you're willing to protect with proof of stake. And for anything that's beyond that, you can require a zero-knowledge proof generation. And the idea would be is you run the DEX in the example I gave you in a trusted execution environment. You would read the DEX state, and if there is a liquidation that's required, you would basically prove that to whatever chain that the perp DEX is settling on, and this proof would create a contract call on these chains to allow the perp DEX to collect the collateral of the user who's insolvent and sell it if necessary. So with this approach, we are building a cross-chain vault product where the idea is we're running investment strategies inside trusted execution environments, and we can, based on TE data, move your, let's say, USDC to the highest yielding Aave pool in the rollups that you want to have exposure to. We're going to be launching this, we're going to be demoing this later today at the main stage. But I will just go to the very end. If you want to try the alpha, just fill this form. We should make it available early December. And yeah, if you want to have any questions, I can take questions for a minute.